You're listening to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, created to help you succeed in your educational journey. Learn more at baremetalcyber.com, where additional prepcasts, books, and training materials await. Let's get started. Data-driven decision-making is the discipline of translating evidence into clear choices, proportionate safeguards, and transparent follow-through. The orientation emphasizes that numbers alone do not create action. Interpretation and framing are what turn data into decisions. Under uncertainty, metrics act as guides to likelihoods and risks, not guarantees, and decisions must scale with both the strength of evidence and the magnitude of potential consequences. Being data-driven does not mean being deterministic. It means that evidence is weighed more heavily than opinion, inertia, or political influence. It also means decisions are made visibly, with rationale recorded and open to review, so accountability and learning improve over time. In this sense, data-driven decision-making is as much about culture as about analytics, embedding habits of proportionality, transparency, and ethical responsibility into everyday choices. Decision framing ensures that metrics answer actionable questions rather than satisfying generic curiosity. Framing connects each decision to outcomes, constraints, and evidence needs. For example, instead of asking how many users signed up this month, framing clarifies, did the sign-up redesign reduce abandonment compared to baseline, and is adoption sufficient to sustain growth targets? This precision prevents dashboards from devolving into trivia and anchors measurement in decisions that matter. It also clarifies what kind of evidence is needed, whether distributions, segmented views, or counterfactuals. Proper framing makes it easier to separate signals that demand action from those that merely describe activity. It sharpens the link between metrics and next steps, ensuring that evidence guides proportionate responses aligned with strategy and risk posture rather than being consumed passively or misapplied. Thresholds and triggers convert vague ranges into clear if-then rules that reduce debate at every fluctuation. For example, if error rates remain under 2%, continue as planned. If they exceed 5%, trigger a rollback. If they fall between, escalate for review. By predefining thresholds, organizations prevent endless conversations about whether a signal is concerning. Triggers also accelerate response, since action is automatic once conditions are met. This discipline makes decisions predictable, reducing reliance on mood or hierarchy. Thresholds anchor accountability, making it clear when intervention is required. They also protect against underreaction, ensuring that drift does not go unchallenged. Triggers transform metrics from passive indicators into active governance tools. They create clarity and speed, helping teams act consistently even under pressure or disagreement. Playbooks translate specific metric shifts into calibrated actions, compressing reaction time while preventing overcorrection. For instance, a playbook might state that if adoption stalls for 3 consecutive weeks, run usability testing before investing in new features. If latency spikes above threshold, route to incident response with predefined mitigation steps. By mapping shifts to responses, playbooks remove ambiguity, reduce stress, and make interventions proportionate. They also codify organizational learning. What worked in the past becomes part of future decision-making. Playbooks prevent improvisation from dominating under uncertainty and ensure that similar problems receive consistent treatment. They also shorten time to recovery by reducing the need for ad hoc debate. In this way, playbooks operationalize data-driven culture, linking signals to decisions with clarity, speed, and accountability. Option sets prevent single-solution bias by presenting multiple feasible paths informed by evidence. Instead of debating one proposal, teams consider alternatives with expected effects, costs, and risks. For example, if churn rises, options might include improving onboarding, adjusting pricing, or enhancing support, each with estimated impact ranges. This structure prevents tunnel vision and encourages balanced evaluation. It also makes trade-offs explicit, showing what is gained and what is delayed by each choice. Option sets reduce decision fragility, since stakeholders can weigh evidence across scenarios rather than arguing over one path. They also reinforce humility. No single solution is guaranteed, and alternatives keep learning alive. By framing decisions as choices among options, organizations align evidence with flexibility, avoiding rigid commitments unsupported by data. Risk appetite statements define tolerances for reliability, security, and user impact so decisions reflect agreed exposure rather than subjective mood. For example, an organization may declare a tolerance of 1 hour of downtime per quarter or a maximum acceptable defect escape rate of 2%. These statements clarify what levels of risk are acceptable and when thresholds must trigger action. They prevent inconsistent responses, where the same issue may provoke panic one week and indifference the next. Risk appetite aligns decisions with organizational strategy, ensuring that trade-offs are made consciously. It also improves communication, as stakeholders know where lines are drawn. By codifying risk tolerance, organizations prevent reactive swings and establish predictable decision criteria grounded in shared values and objectives. Opportunity cost thinking forces decisions to account for what is displaced by each choice. Every action consumes capacity, meaning something else will be delayed or deprioritized. For example, allocating resources to expand a feature may mean postponing security improvements. Opportunity cost highlights these trade-offs, grounding decisions in reality rather than aspiration. It makes the true price of action visible, beyond direct costs. By evaluating benefits in relation to what is foregone, organizations avoid the illusion of unlimited capacity. This thinking also clarifies priorities, showing which outcomes are most important at a given time. Opportunity cost embeds discipline into decision-making, ensuring that choices reflect both potential gains and sacrifices. It reframes action not as a free addition, but as a reallocation of limited focus. Counterfactual awareness prevents decisions driven by momentum rather than evidence. Asking what happens if we do nothing clarifies whether action is truly necessary. For example, if churn is trending upward, the counterfactual may reveal that seasonality would have caused the rise regardless, suggesting a different response. Counterfactuals help teams separate urgency from illusion, preventing activity for its own sake. They also provide baselines for evaluating outcomes. If action produces no better result than doing nothing, its value is questionable. By explicitly considering inaction, organizations protect against overcommitment and wasted effort. Counterfactuals add humility, reminding decision-makers that not all problems require intervention, and that sometimes the best choice is patience. They ground decisions in comparative reasoning rather than impulse. Evidence strength grading rates signals by quality, sample size, and bias risk so that bolder actions require sturdier support. For example, a single anecdotal complaint may warrant monitoring but not structural redesign, while consistent survey data from thousands of users may justify major investment. Grading evidence prevents overreaction to weak signals and ensures proportionality. It also builds transparency, showing stakeholders why certain inputs carry more weight. Evidence strength framing protects credibility by acknowledging limitations rather than overstating confidence. It encourages layered responses. Light probes when signals are weak, decisive action when signals are strong. By aligning action magnitude with evidence quality, organizations maintain both agility and responsibility, ensuring that decisions remain rational under uncertainty. An experiment-first bias turns uncertainty into learning before large commitments are made. Instead of launching fully, teams design small, low-blast radius tests that resolve key questions quickly. For example, before rolling out a pricing change globally, a limited trial in one region tests user response. Experimentation reduces the risk of escalation of commitment and provides evidence that guides scaling. This bias embeds humility into decision-making, treating every proposal as a hypothesis to test rather than a foregone conclusion. It also accelerates learning, as small experiments provide rapid feedback. By favoring tests, organizations maintain adaptability, avoiding irreversible bets based on speculation. Experiment-first decision-making reframes risk as inquiry, ensuring that bold moves are grounded in evidence rather than assumption. Ethical guardrails keep data-driven decisions aligned with privacy, fairness, and transparency. Data use must be proportionate and respectful, not exploitative. For example, using customer telemetry to improve usability is ethical when anonymized and explained, but invasive if identifiers are retained unnecessarily. Guardrails ensure that decisions improve outcomes without creating harm or inequity. They also protect trust, demonstrating that data-driven does not mean unbounded. Transparency about how evidence is gathered and applied reassures stakeholders that their data serves them, not just the organization. Ethical guardrails embed duty of care into decision-making, ensuring that evidence is used responsibly. This alignment strengthens legitimacy and sustainability, preventing short-term wins from undermining long-term relationships. Decision rights clarify who decides, who advises, and who executes. Without clear rights, feedback loops degenerate into churn, with shadow vetoes and unresolved debates. By assigning explicit roles, decider, advisor, executor, organizations streamline decisions while still respecting input. For example, a product manager may decide, engineers advise on feasibility, and operations execute implementation. Clarity prevents confusion and speeds resolution. It also improves accountability, since responsibility is visible. Decision rights balance inclusivity with authority, ensuring that data-informed discussions do not paralyze progress. They transform metrics into shared inputs, but not shared paralysis. By clarifying roles, organizations maintain both speed and legitimacy in decision-making. Documentation of rationale records the context behind decisions, the options considered, trade-offs accepted, and signals relied upon. Without documentation, decisions are forgotten, and future teams repeat mistakes or debates. Recording rationale also builds accountability, as stakeholders can see how evidence shaped outcomes. For example, a decision log might note that adoption lag led to usability testing rather than feature expansion, with thresholds and evidence cited. Documentation also creates learning material, turning past decisions into guides for future ones. It transforms data-driven culture from reactive to cumulative. By making rationale visible, organizations reinforce transparency and protect credibility. They show that decisions are not arbitrary but rooted in evidence and logic, even when outcomes differ from expectations. Communication norms translate decisions into language tailored for each audience, ensuring that evidence is accessible and actionable. Teams may need detailed metrics and next steps, while executives require plain language implications for strategy and risk. Norms include explaining uncertainty, linking to underlying evidence, and setting clear next checks. For example, a decision to roll out a feature incrementally might be communicated as, "Initial trial shows strong adoption, expansion planned with further validation in 30 days. Communication prevents misinterpretation and strengthens alignment. It also preserves trust, as stakeholders see that evidence and rationale are shared openly. By embedding norms, organizations make data-driven decisions not only correct but also comprehensible and credible across diverse audiences. Anti-pattern watch prevents data-driven decisions from becoming distorted by misuse of metrics. Common pitfalls include metric theater, where dashboards are used as performance props rather than decision tools, cherry-picking favorable numbers to justify predetermined choices, and Goodhart's law, where measures replace missions as targets. For example, optimizing for higher survey scores may degrade real usability if the metric becomes the goal. By naming and rejecting these anti-patterns, organizations preserve integrity. Anti-pattern vigilance reinforces humility, reminding teams that metrics are imperfect guides, not ends in themselves. It ensures that data-driven decisions remain focused on outcomes, not on appearances or scorekeeping. This discipline protects trust and keeps evidence aligned with the mission it is meant to serve. For more cyber-related content and books, please check out cyberauthor.me. Also, there are other prepcasts on cybersecurity and more at baremetalcyber.com. Routing from dashboards ensures that when a metric crosses a threshold, ownership and accountability are immediately clear. Too often, dashboards are observed but not acted upon because no one knows who is responsible or by when. Routing solves this by assigning specific owners and due dates to every triggered signal, turning passive observation into trackable work. For example, if a latency measure exceeds tolerance, the routing rule might automatically assign it to the operations lead with a deadline for mitigation. This practice prevents drift, where issues remain visible but unresolved. Routing transforms dashboards into living workflows rather than static displays, closing the loop between evidence and action. By ensuring that signals are never orphaned, organizations build confidence that data is not just monitored, but consistently acted upon in predictable, accountable ways. Decision cadence formalizes the rhythm by which evidence is converted into choices. Instead of debating when to act or waiting for crises, organizations schedule regular forums where metrics are reviewed and routed to reordering, safeguards, or confirmatory experiments. For example, a team may hold weekly operational reviews for flow and defect signals, while quarterly forums evaluate strategic outcomes like adoption and retention. Cadence creates predictability. Stakeholders know when data will be considered and when decisions will follow. It also balances responsiveness with stability, ensuring that signals are addressed neither too slowly nor too reactively. Decision cadence turns evidence into habit, embedding accountability into governance without requiring ad hoc escalation. This rhythm keeps momentum steady while still leaving space for emergency decisions when thresholds demand immediate response. The proportionality principle ensures that actions scale with both the magnitude of movement and the strength of evidence. Overreaction to small shifts wastes resources, while underreaction to major deviations undermines resilience. For example, a slight rise in error rates may warrant monitoring, while a sustained spike above tolerance demands rollback. Proportionality avoids paralysis by defining what size of response is appropriate at different thresholds of confidence. It also prevents whiplash, where teams swing between extremes of inaction and overcorrection. By calibrating responses to both size and certainty, proportionality maintains credibility with stakeholders. It demonstrates that evidence is not only observed but interpreted with judgment. This principle reinforces trust, as actions appear measured and reasonable, rather than impulsive or politically driven. Scenario ranges strengthen decisions by replacing point forecasts with ranges that reflect variability and uncertainty. Instead of predicting a single outcome, reviews present best case, base case, and worst case scenarios or percentile ranges. For example, adoption may be forecasted at 50% likelihood within 30 to 45%, with worst case at 25 and best case at 60. These ranges prepare teams for volatility and encourage contingency planning. They also prevent overconfidence, acknowledging that metrics are probabilistic, not deterministic. Scenario ranges sharpen resilience by making plans robust to multiple futures. They shift conversations from, "Will this happen?" to "How do we prepare across possibilities?" This discipline acknowledges uncertainty, honestly, aligning decisions to probabilities rather than false certainties. Scenario ranges make strategy adaptive, protecting organizations from brittle commitments that fail when reality diverges from forecasts. Stop-loss and rollback criteria embed discipline into decision-making by defining exit points in advance. Without them, organizations risk escalation of commitment, pouring resources into failing paths because of sunk costs or optimism bias. Stop-loss rules state when to abandon or pivot, while rollback criteria specify when to revert changes. For example, if adoption remains below 10% after 3 months, rollback may be required, or if latency exceeds threshold for 2 consecutive weeks, stop-loss triggers replacement. By predefining these criteria, organizations remove subjectivity at the moment of stress. They protect against the human tendency to cling to failing initiatives. This practice makes reversals normal not shameful, reinforcing that evidence, not ego, guides choices. Stop-loss and rollback make decision-making accountable to reality, not momentum. Resource realism grounds decisions in the constraints of available skills, environments, and time. A decision may look attractive on paper but fail in practice if resources are insufficient. For example, launching a new feature globally may exceed available support staff, creating user frustration. Resource realism ensures that evidence-based choices are executable, not aspirational. It requires assessing whether teams have the expertise, infrastructure, and bandwidth to implement chosen paths. By aligning ambition with capacity, organizations avoid overcommitment and the reputational damage of failed delivery. Resource realism also strengthens prioritization by making trade-offs visible. If capacity is limited, which outcomes matter most? This discipline ties metrics not only to desirability but to feasibility, reinforcing that responsible decision-making balances evidence with operational reality. Cross-team alignment ensures that evidence and decisions remain coherent when multiple groups share dependencies or platforms. Without alignment, one team may act on a signal in ways that disrupt others. For example, tightening an air budget policy in one service may impact throughput for dependent teams. Cross-team reviews reconcile these perspectives, ensuring that responses to metrics are harmonized. This coordination prevents contradictory actions and fosters shared ownership of outcomes. It also supports comparability, as shared definitions and thresholds are clarified across groups. By aligning evidence interpretation across boundaries, organizations prevent local optimization that undermines systemic health. Cross-team alignment transforms metrics from siloed inputs into shared governance tools, reinforcing that decisions must consider the full system rather than isolated parts. Vendor and partner coordination extends data-driven decisions across external boundaries. Many signals, such as uptime, latency, or compliance readiness, depend on third-party providers. If vendors are not integrated into the decision loop, actions stall or misalign. Coordination involves sharing relevant metrics, aligning service-level expectations, and establishing escalation rules. For example, if a vendor API exceeds latency thresholds, both organizations must respond through agreed playbooks. Extending coordination ensures that external dependencies do not undermine responsiveness. It also builds trust with partners, demonstrating that evidence drives shared accountability. Vendor coordination reflects the reality that modern systems rely on ecosystems, not just internal teams. Integrating partners into decision-making reinforces agility across boundaries, making data-driven culture systemic. Compliance by design integrates governance into decision artifacts, ensuring speed without sacrificing accountability. Each decision document should include approvals, traceability, and evidence references so that actions are auditable without parallel processes. For example, a pivot decision may include the risk assessment, thresholds triggered, and rationale logged in compliance systems. This approach makes transparency continuous rather than episodic. It reduces audit stress since evidence accumulates naturally. Compliance by design demonstrates that agility and governance can coexist. Speed is preserved while obligations are fulfilled. By embedding compliance in artifacts, organizations avoid the trap of fast but fragile decisions. They prove that principled, evidence-based decisions can withstand scrutiny from both internal and external stakeholders. The learning loop closes the decision cycle by checking whether outcomes matched expectations and updating thresholds or playbooks accordingly. Without this loop, decisions may repeat mistakes or fail to evolve. For example, if a rollback succeeded but signals suggested thresholds were set too conservatively, the playbook can be revised. Learning loops institutionalize humility, recognizing that evidence is imperfect and that adaptation is continuous. They also build organizational memory, ensuring that lessons from one cycle inform the next. This feedback mechanism turns data-driven decision-making into a living practice rather than a static system. By embedding learning, organizations improve decision quality over time, making evidence sharper and actions more reliable. Measure evolution recognizes that not all predictors remain relevant forever. Metrics that once guided decisions effectively may lose signal value as products, risks, or strategies change. For example, early adoption counts may matter less once maturity is reached, while retention becomes more critical. Weak predictors must be retired, and sharper measures introduced, with rationale documented. This evolution ensures that data-driven systems remain adaptive. It also prevents clutter from outdated metrics that mislead or distract. By refreshing measures, organizations align evidence with current context, keeping decisions tethered to reality. Measure evolution is proof that being data-driven is not about clinging to numbers but about continually refining them to serve the mission faithfully. Culture reinforcement is the glue that sustains trust in evidence over opinion. Organizations must recognize and celebrate principled decisions, even when they involve reversals. For example, pivoting away from a failing initiative when signals go negative should be treated as a success of discipline, not a failure of ambition. By rewarding adherence to evidence, leaders reinforce that data-driven means courageous humility, not just convenient validation. This culture protects against gaming metrics, ignoring signals, or rewarding only positive outcomes. Reinforcement shows that what matters is not the direction of a decision, but the integrity of its rationale. By embedding this value, organizations preserve long-term trust in their data-driven culture, ensuring it remains resilient under pressure. Remote-friendly practices extend decision-making inclusively across distributed teams. Written pre-reads allow participants to prepare asynchronously. Async votes capture input across time zones, and recorded summaries provide transparency for those unable to attend live sessions. This inclusivity prevents geographic or scheduling privilege from dominating decisions. For example, a distributed product council may circulate evidence packets for review in advance, then hold a brief decision session with documented votes. Remote-friendly practices sustain speed and equity, ensuring that decisions are fast, yet representative. They also increase resilience, since decisions are documented in accessible formats rather than dependent on presence in a room. Remote inclusivity ensures that data-driven decisions reflect the full system, not just the loudest or most local voices. Success indicators confirm whether data-driven decision practices are improving outcomes. These indicators include clearer trade-offs, faster cycle times from signal to action, and fewer reversals caused by overlooked evidence. For example, a decision that once took weeks of debate may now resolve in days with transparent thresholds and playbooks. Stakeholders may report greater trust in decisions, noting that rationales are clear and evidence is visible. Reduced rework provides further proof, as signals are acted upon earlier and with proportionate responses. Success indicators validate that data-driven decision-making is not theoretical but practical. They demonstrate that evidence-based culture produces measurable gains in speed, quality, and trust, reinforcing continued investment in these practices. Data-driven decision synthesis emphasizes that strong evidence alone is insufficient without disciplined framing, triggers, proportionality, and follow-through. Routing from dashboards, decision cadence, and playbook linkage make signals actionable. Proportionality, scenario ranges, and stop-loss criteria ensure that responses are calibrated to both evidence and risk. Resource realism, cross-team alignment, and partner coordination ground choices in feasibility and system-wide coherence. Compliance by design, learning loops, and measure evolution embed accountability and adaptability. Culture reinforcement and remote practices sustain inclusivity and trust. Together, these elements ensure that metrics do not become theater but remain instruments of principled, auditable choices. The result is an organization where evidence reliably guides what happens next, balancing speed, safety, and transparency under uncertainty. Thanks for tuning in to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, your trusted source for cybersecurity news and insights. Remember to subscribe at baremetalcyber.com so you never miss an update. And visit cyberauthor.me for best-selling cybersecurity books that equip you with expert knowledge. Until next time, stay secure and stay vigilant.